Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. It's funny. I had some famous apologist, semi-famous apologist, criticizing me for not investigating Christianity deeply enough. That maybe I should go read my Bible. I get that a lot, and I'm thinking that I'm reading it the best way that you can, with people who actually know what it says and can explain so that I don't have to rely on my own interpretation. Sometimes your individual interpretations might be wrong. Bear that in mind.
Surely not.
Welcome back, Dr. Kip Davis. Haven't seen you in a while.
It's been ages.
Good to have you back.
Sorry about that. Thanks.
All right, so who's reading today? And are we just going to dive into it?
I believe it's been a while since Dr. Kip has read.
It has been so long.
Have I? Okay. So how do we do this? Do you just want me to?
Well, you read in the chapter until Tomer tells you that you've read far enough.
Read up to I'll tell you when. All right.
Read why don't you just
read up to 23?
Holy cow! Chapter 2, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Wow. Okay. All right. I'm going to read from the old Jewish Publication Society, 1985.
Oh. Yeah, me too. That's
We're
my version. I think
up.
Isaac's
Oh,
as well.
is it? Oh,
yes.
Well, I'm using the contemporary JPS.
I'm using the 85 one as well.
A bunch of scrubs. I've been using the altar version this whole time.
All right, what should I use? Because I'm no longer happy with NIV. I've seen some discrepancies where NIV will be the only one out that says this one interpretation, and all these others will say something else.
I mean, ESV is pretty solid. What's the one? The NRSV.
That's NRSV is still the scholarly standard text. Yeah. So when you publish, unless you're making your own translations, usually you just use NRSV. So
NRSV. All right, I will.
That one's good. So my
new revised standard.
This new revised standard, yeah. My next plan is to just take chunks of the text and plug them into ChatGPT and see what comes out. So, but anyways, I'll read. You want me to read chapter 2 up to 23 then?
I'm so confused. I've got the anglicized Catholic edition and just the anglicized. What?
I can help you.
We're off to a great start.
All right.
Remember, God is not the author of confusion.
Yeah. God didn't write this either.
Whenever you guys are ready, shall I start?
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So this is Moses speaking. And the other thing I tend to do when I read from any version, depending on the audience, I don't do this so much when I'm surrounded by Orthodox Jews, but I will substitute the Lord consistently for Yahweh. So, verse 1, we marched back into the wilderness by way of the Sea of Reeds, and as Yahweh had spoken to me, and skirted the hill country of Seir a long time. Then Yahweh said to me, you have been skirting this hill country long enough. Now turn north and charge the people as follows. You will be passing through the territory of your kinsmen, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir. Though they will be afraid of you, be very careful not to provoke them. For I will not give you of their land, so much as a foot can tread on. I have given the hill country of Seir as a possession to Esau. What food you eat, you shall obtain from them for money. Even the water you drink, you shall procure from them for money. Indeed, Yahweh your God has blessed you in all your undertakings. He has watched over your wanderings through his great wilderness. Yahweh your God has been with you these past 40 years. You have lacked nothing. We then moved on, away from our kinsmen, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir, away from the road of the Arabah, away from Elat and Ezion Geber, and we marched on the direction of the wilderness of Moab. And Yahweh said to me, do not harass the Moabites or provoke them to war, for I will not give you any of their land as a possession. I have assigned Ar as a possession to the descendants of Lot. It was formerly inhabited by the Emim, a people great and numerous and as tall as the Anakites. Like the Anakites, they are counted as Rephaim, but the Moabites call them Emim. Similarly, Seir was formerly inhabited by the Horites, but the descendants of Esau dispossessed them, wiping them out and settling in their place, just as Israel did in the land they were to possess, which Yahweh had given them. Up now, cross the Wadi Zedad. So we crossed the Wadi Zedad. The time that we spent in travel from Kadesh Barnea until we crossed the Wadi Zedad was 38 years, until the whole generation of warriors had perished from the camp, as Yahweh had sworn concerning them. Indeed, the hand of Yahweh struck them to root them out from the camp to the last man. When all the warriors among the people had died off, then Yahweh spoke to me, saying, you are now passing through the territory of Moab, through Ar. You will be close to the Ammonites. Do not harass them or start a fight with them, for I will not give any part of the land of the Ammonites to you as a possession. I have signed it as a possession to, the descendants of Lot. It, too, is counted as Rephaim country. It was formerly inhabited by Rephaim, whom the Ammonites call Zamzumim, a people great and numerous and as tall as the Anakites. Yahweh wiped them out, so that the Ammonites dispossessed them and settled in their place, as he did for the descendants of Esau who live in Seir, when he wiped out the Horites before them, so that they dispossessed them and settled in their place, as is still the case. So too with the Avim who dwelt in villages. Oh, this is it, right? This is the last verse.
Just read 23.
Yeah, so too with the Avim, who dwelt in villages in the vicinity of Gaza. The Caphtorim, who came from Crete, wiped them out and settled in their place.
So on this, I mean, I'm sure that both Kip and Tomer will just like anything that I have to say, they will already say it. So I want to note that there is a connection here, especially that I want to hit on with the Rephaim, right? Them being giants usually, and I think what did you say? Was it the Anakites, right? In verse 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Alter says that they are as lofty as the giants. So
yeah, Anak could also be read as giants as well.
Okay, gotcha. So, but yeah, the Rephaim were thought to be this race of giants. In many ways, they were similar to the Nephilim, and in some texts, they're actually switched. I think in First Enoch, the descendancy changes from giants to Nephilim, or the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
It contradicts the biblical way the descendancy happens. So they're just flipped. But like 2 Samuel 21 mentions the huge size of the Philistine warriors that David defeats, who were, I think they're called the descendants of the Rapha, and that's usually thought to be related to the Rephaim. And I'm going to hit on this more when we get to Og. But yeah, that is the one note. They were this race of giants that, if you want to claim that like this is your rightfully possessed land, to make that a bit more loftier, to make that a bit, to give that a bit more oomph, say it used to be inhabited by these great giants, and the land was dispossessed from them to you.
Big. It was this big. It was this big.
Importantly, though, I mean, Moses makes a point here of noting, or I should say, Yahweh makes a point of noting that these are people whom Israel is not allowed to dispossess, because they've been given their territory,
and
which feeds.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just like, no, please continue. I actually just wanted to feed on that point. Please, sorry.
Yeah. So I mean, this is part of it gets really complicated, and it's something that that plays into the song, what's called the Song of Moses in Deuteronomy 32, which is like the poetic. No, the Song of Moses, which is the entire chapter of Deuteronomy 32, is thought by scholars to be kind of like the core of Deuteronomy, either the core of Deuteronomy around which a bunch of material was written, or very, very early related to like the earlier versions of Deuteronomy. And it's in that text where you get this statement of how Elyon divided all the nations among his sons and gave to Yahweh his portion. So he's also, we have sort of an expression of this taking place here too, where these other nations have been allotted their portions as well.
Yeah, and the polytheistic roots really show through there.
Yeah, they do.
But it's interesting with Moab and Ammon, particularly. What stood out to me, because of course I remember we went over all the mythology of Genesis and how they were related, but Moab, sometimes they focus on the whole incestuous hookup in a cave, and sometimes they focus on but it's Lot, and he was Abraham's cousin, so he's technically family, and he's entitled to some inheritance, yada yada yada. So it's one of those things where at different times of different either authorship or editorship or whatever, you have focuses on, oh no, we have to be somewhat nice to these people because we're related, because the mythology, but then over here maybe they're evil and we should destroy them, but it's just this one time. But it's yeah, it's interesting.
Okay, I think I'll start my commentary. First on verse 4, they will be afraid of you. Weinfeld comments, this stands in contradiction to Numbers 20, verses 18 to 20, where it says that Edom went out against them, and that Israel had therefore to turn away from them. In order to solve this difficulty, Rashbam distinguished between the Edomites in Numbers 20 and the people who lived in Seir in verses 4 and 29. The former, according to this view, denied the passage of the Israelites, while the latter agreed to it. This view, however, can hardly be accepted because the people who live in Seir are always identical with the Edomites. Compare Genesis 32:4, 36, verses 9 to 21 and 21.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up, there seems to be some differences between the way it's given here in Deuteronomy as in Genesis, in Exodus and Leviticus. And I think that's not the only difference.
No, not at all. There were definitely times they were supposed to kill Moab, and this time they're supposed to respect them as family and fellow inheritors.
Yeah.
Verse 5, Lundbom comments, Deuteronomy takes the view that God has allotted territory to each nation, not just to Israel, and the Seir Mountains, along with other Edomite land, have been given as a possession to Edom. Compare Genesis 36:43. The same is said with regards to land inhabited by the Moabites and Ammonites in verses 9 and 19. This view is expressed in 32:8, reflected also in the universalism of Amos 9:7. Deuteronomy even goes so far as to say that the heavenly bodies were allotted to other nations for their worship in verse 19. Weinfeld points out how Hittite kings, in distributing land to their vassals, tell them not to trespass on neighboring territories. Verse 9, about Ar, the city, Tigay comments, it was a city or region in Moab. The reference to its burning by Sichon in Numbers 21:28 favors taking it as a city. Since Ar stands for Moab in verses 9 and 18 and 29, it must have been an important city, perhaps its capital at the time. It could be identical to Il Moab, a city on Moab's northern border mentioned in Numbers 22:36, or to Kil Moab, apparently the capital, mentioned parallel to Ar in Isaiah 15:1. Ar and Ir and Kil could be interchangeable terms, all meaning city, end quote. Septuagint reads Aroer, which is found in verse 36 and 3:12 and 4:48. The Targums render Lechayat, which I don't understand, and Peshitta does not mention Ar.
Interestingly, Alter notes that if it's a precise site, it hasn't been located, but the context suggests that it designates the whole region inhabited by the Moabites. At least the context in verse 18 for it.
Now, about verse 10 to 12, Nelson comments, the text renders these alien peoples as terrifying as possible. As Anakim, they are the mythic giants whose huge bones and megalithic architecture inspired fearsome folk tales. Emim means terrifying ones, and as Targums and Rashi render. Along with the Zamzumim, they are also counted among the numinous Rephaim, quote-unquote, divine princes and spirits of ancient heroes dwelling in the underworld. Terrible as they were, however, Israel's neighbors were able to defeat them with Yahweh's help. Og will also turn out to be a Rephaim in 3:11, but will be easily defeated. The Horites, in contrast, are described as an ordinary non-mythic people. Compare Genesis 36, verses 20 to 30. Scholars often connect them to the Hurrians, but the author was most likely thinking of them as cave dwellers, in Hebrew, me'ara chur, which means cave, end quote. Lundbom writes that many scholars maintain that the Horites and Hurrians should be kept separate. And Targums Pseudo Jonathan reads Horites as Genosia. I don't really know why. I think Genosia means something large. I tried to find what it means in Aramaic, but couldn't really understand.
Targum Pseudo Jonathan?
Yes.
Genosia.
That's like the other Targum next to Targum Onkelos. There's also like Targum Neofiti. I think it was written like.
Sorry, no, I was just looking it up here because I don't have them named. I have them numbered for some reason.
Ah, okay.
Which is not helpful.
Now about verse 15, the Lord's hand. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. You're only up to 15.
Okay, 15. The Lord's hand was against them. The Targums render a plague from the Lord against them. Weinfeld comments, hand of God is usually associated with pestilence, as seen in Exodus 9, verses 3 and 15, 1 Samuel 5, verses 6 and 7, etc. In Ugaritic, as well as in Akkadian texts, the hand of God, especially that of the god Nergal, also means pestilence. Compare in an Ugaritic text, quote, the hand of the god is here, for the pestilence is very strong, end quote. And in Akkadian, quote, the hand of Nergal is in my country, end quote, in reference to death or pestilence. In the story of the spies, Numbers 14, which Deuteronomy draws on, God actually threatens to destroy the people by pestilence, Devil, in 14:12. And about the spies, it says that they died by pestilence, Hebrew Magepha, in verse 27.
I can't be the first person to think that God appears to be the bloody pestilence.
About verses 20 to 23. So Nelson comments, there is a break in the narrative between Yahweh's admonition in verses 18 to 19 and the command of verse 24. This gap is filled by a second group of ethnographic observations. From a literary perspective, the time consumed by making these comments may be thought of as giving Israel a sufficient amount of time in the narrative world to move from the local of Yahweh's speech to the crossing point itself. About the in verse 20,
was that a comment on verse 22?
No, 20 to 23.
So in verse 22, is it a comment on the expression of until this day?
No, it's a comment on 20 to 23 about the section.
In general.
Yes, I also have 2 comments on 20 and 23, however.
Do you have anything about the usage of until this day? It is quite a...
No, I have about Zamzumim and Kaftor.
Okay, so I did look into this. It is something that comes up a lot in Deuteronomy. Until this day, like this day. And all of the Jewish commentaries and stuff seem to imply that this means, it's kind of like prophetic. It's forever. So whoever is reading it can just say until this day. But obviously, there are examples where this is not true anymore. Like the descendants of Esau do not still live in Seir until this day. Right.
Yeah, so I mentioned this on the first episode for Deuteronomy, but this phrasing of until this day is used a lot in Deuteronomy and in the Deuteronomistic history. There's actually a lot of stuff that's indicative about these couple chapters here, so 2 and 3, that kind of show that it's not really of Mosaic authorship. And
Much
I
later.
I pulled up an interesting comment, and part of me kind of wishes P-Town was here, because I think it'd be more interesting to have him here for this. So there was an 18th century theologian, and he was actually a Methodist leader, John Wesley, who commented on the usage of "until this day" in Deuteronomy 3, and he actually holds this idea for quite a lot of the usages of "until this day" in the Deuteronomistic history and Deuteronomy in general. So he says this must be put among those passages which were not written by Moses, but added by those holy men who digested the books of Moses into this order and inserted some few passages to accommodate things to their own time and people. And I mean, Wesley was working off of people like Calvin.
Yeah,
And
that's
they
and Luther.
digested these passages, and then what did they do?
By digested, would have been like read
They
and understood. Right?
defecated these passages
Yes,
somewhere
they
else.
defecated them. Yes, and then they
Okay.
inserted them.
But
So
that's a huge thing for John Wesley, knowing who he was,
right.
for him to make that admission in the context of history where he was at, especially working off of fucking assholes like Calvin. Like,
Right.
that is the level of intellectual honesty I have to respect, coming that far back and that place.
Yeah,
That
I mean,
is-
he was kind of like,
damn.
or, in the 18th century, right? Like a lot of the like critical scholarship wasn't the modern critical scholarship, but it was like kind of just starting. So like a lot of people started getting their critical commentaries on biblical stuff in that time period. I think
Moses Mendelssohn, I think.
didn't Voltaire do like some commentaries too as well? Like
You
there's
can't
a
put
whole
Voltaire with Wesley.
no, I'm not
Voltaire
put, no,
was
I'm saying that this is like a period where people are like starting to critically analyze
starting to
these
think.
texts.
A little bit.
Did you mention I remember you mentioning Ibn Ezra last week as well, but
Yes,
was it about this comment?
Very
There
early.
No,
hasn't
it was
been a
about-
weekend that he
there's-
hasn't brought up Ibn Ezra.
No, I mean Lawrence.
No,
Yeah, so
I
I did-
brought it up.
Because you bring up, because he has this weird thing he calls it the secret of the 12, which is reference to the last 12 verses.
Yes.
Which, so Ibn Ezra actually holds that those were not written by Moses, but he seems to he's written on the not I think it was in like the beginning of last week's chapter. He does write, if you understand the secret of the 12. ...
You'll come to truth. or something.
yeah, something like that. So it seems to be that he's implying that it's possible that these usages of until this day he could be implying that it's possible that this is not Mosaic.
Right.
Although apparently there was someone called, we don't know exactly who he is, but Ibn Ezra quotes him and says a guy called Yitzchaki, which
Rashi?
Not Rashi though. So Rashi is Shlomo
Rabbi
ben
Shlomo
Yitzchaki,
Yitzchaki.
right? Which is technically just Solomon the son of Isaac, but Yitzchaki it could be someone else. It's definitely someone else. So apparently, this is the quote from Ibn Ezra on Genesis 36:31. Yitzchaki claims in his book that this chapter was composed during the reign of King Jehoshaphat. Far be it for one to believe that our chapter was written in the days of Jehoshaphat, as Yitzchaki maintains. Indeed, his book is fit to be burnt. And I'm guessing it
This is
was.
the guy
Ibn
who's
Ezra.
famous. This is the guy who's famous for jumping, right?
What?
Who?
So,
Yeah.
It's just a joke.
Although on Ibn Ezra,
Yeah.
so this is from a work called "The Time, Place, and Purpose of the Deuteronomistic History: The Evidence of Until This Day," from Jeffrey. I'm gonna butcher this name. Is it Geohigan? I don't know how to pronounce it. So he references Wesley's kind of in his discussion about Wesley's commentary on Until This Day, especially on Joshua 4:9. So Wesley's proposal, at least for the Deuteronomy one, reflects Ibn Ezra's similar desire to extend the time between the event described and the penning of the words until this day. So he does at least notice the similarity in ideas there.
Just to be clear, because I'm sorry, I missed the first Kisik. I missed the first little bit of Deuteronomy 1. I assume, went over how, like, is it still the consensus that Deuteronomy was largely written during the time of Josiah by the priests who raised him to be a child king and Yahweh extremists?
I mean, I kind of covered it, but like because there's been a lot of scholarship done on it, right? And it kind of falls anywhere between like the time of Hezekiah and then like just like
yeah, no, I mean a lot
this...
of the Deuteronomistic stuff because Hezekiah was also a Yahweh extremist, and they definitely retconned the history in his favor a little bit, but also Josiah. But I mean, he was just a boy king. He was a fucking 12 when they put him in and killed his grandmother.
Right. Yeah. Some people are like, oh yeah, it was written under Hezekiah, and then this was what Huldah found, right?
Found, yeah. Because it was like, we were cleaning the temple and we found this book of law. It's
sounds
totally
sus,
Moses.
Yeah. So
I hope you don't mind me deviating. I just want to take advantage of the fact that we've got Kip here. I am constantly arguing with idiots on the interwebs. I've got
you should stop.
Creationist Christians continuously hounding me, and since you're here, I just want to ask you a handful of questions, if you don't mind me just deviating for a moment.
Sure thing, Aaron. I'm gonna wait.
I was gonna say,
sorry, I didn't
take all your time in the world.
Okay, so one of the people arguing with me that the Exodus definitely happened. The Exodus definitely happened. Kip, I just want to know, how would you, this is the question that was posed to me today. These are 5 questions, if you don't mind, real quick. 1, how do you refute the golden and other coral-encrusted chariot wheels underwater between the 2 beaches where the Jews crossed the Red Sea?
I mean, that's coral, isn't it? I mean, I'm not an undersea biology guy, but as far as I understand, those are coral formations, aren't they?
Isn't there one like
no idea?
Isn't there a Roman wheel?
I understand too. It's not even a wheel.
There have been a couple of con men who have claimed that they went and saw the chariot wheels, and one of them took video.
Ron Wyatt.
Yeah, Wyatt took video of he
Ron
set up
Wyatt.
something.
Okay, the guy that even answers in Genesis admits is a fraud.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Second question: how do you refute?
Source.
Second question: how do you refute the cemetery filled with thousands of Jews killed by God for worshiping the golden calf just below Mount Sinai?
What
in Arabia?
What?
I've never even heard that claim.
I've never heard anything like that. So Mount Sinai? Like,
this is what Christians
in Arabia
with every damn day. I asked the guy, where is Mount Sinai?
Nuts.
I never heard from him again. It was earlier. It was like
ask him
almost
to provide
24 hours ago.
Ask him to provide a single source on that claim, even if it's some bullshit creationist source. Just
anything.
a single source.
All right.
Yeah.
Third question: how do you refute the pillars on each side of the crossing left by King Solomon in remembrance of the Red Sea crossing?
What?
Has he been reading?
Wait, hold on. Is there
shit?
Okay, maybe
this sounds familiar, but I don't think they exist anymore.
I feel
they ever
like
did.
I feel like something like this about these pillars of remembrance came up in like the works of Josephus, and they're hinted at in like a New Testament text, but I don't think that was about Solomon. I think it was about something else. But I remember that popping up, but I don't. Cat, shut up. But I don't remember it being related to Solomon.
By the way, my
Lawrence,
family and I vacationed on the Red Sea once. It's lovely.
You tell your cat to shut up, and we couldn't even hear your cat. When my dog goes off and I tell him to shut up, I can't hear anything but the dog.
Also, you guys should not talk back to his Lord and Master.
Okay, apparently it is related to King Solomon, but
did somebody Oh, what are you looking up? Is
Uh,
there something you can read? I don't know this
Okay,
about
so it's the
Solomon's
same. It's the
pillars.
same. I found a website that's also got the golden chariot wheel, human bones at the bottom of the Red Sea, blah blah blah. But so it might just be the same source that this person is using. Last but not least are Solomon's pillars. These are 2 huge pillars on each side of the Red Sea that King Solomon set up as a memorial to the Red Sea crossing. One is found on the south end of Nuweiba Beach, and the other is across the sea on the Saudi border. When the pillar on the Egyptian side was first discovered in 1978, there were Hebrew words inscribed in it like Mizram, death, Pharaoh, Edom, Moses, Yahweh, and Solomon. Unfortunately, these words have been removed by the Egyptian government since then.
Of course.
As I researched this topic, I found many websites that says there is no archaeological evidence to support what's found in the Bible. Oh, okay, that's just this person. Like, that's it.
Can you
That's
drop?
the whole.
I'd like to
source.
take a look at that if you want. If you could drop
Yeah,
the link to
please
that
put the
in the
link. I want to see
private
this
chat,
shit.
because I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind.
All right,
Should I
I
put it
want
in
to
the
move on to the
public?
next question because I want to
Okay.
make
Yes.
this just
Because
a
that's
real quick
is
aside.
that 3? Yeah.
Yeah, not
Are we on
question
4 now?
4. How do you refute the melted sand on Nuweiba Beach, where the pillar of fire kept the Egyptian army from attacking the millions of Jews while they crossed through the middle of the Red Sea?
Yeah, I can't. I mean,
Just-
sorry.
Just to be clear, like I'm pretty sure like Kip has done this too, but like there's been like a bunch of text or a bunch of like stuff done on biblical archaeology. I haven't even heard this claim.
no.
You'd think that'd come up.
So I just think it's funny that biblical scholars and historians and archaeologists are completely unaware of the Ron Wyatt level fraudulent shit that these creationists bring to me. The final question.
Oh, okay.
The final question. How do you refute the thousands of brimstones so pure that they can't be found anywhere? What on earth embedded all throughout the locations of the historic Sodom and Gomorrah, where still nothing grows to this day?
Are you sure it didn't say unto this day?
Wow. You got me. You got me, man.
Okay, what I'm getting is that
so-
is that all the experts, and I'm sure I'm going to get this when I inquire about more experts, is I'm going to get, the fuck are you talking about?
Right. Yeah. Do you know how I commonly respond with regards to claims about the Exodus? Is that given the time, whether it's 15th century or 13th century, when you have hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people, leaving Egypt and going into Canaan, people are aware, aren't they, that Egypt still basically controlled
Yes.
Canaan
Yes.
when this happened, right?
Yes. Yes.
So, were those your questions, Aaron? Like, was that all of them? Did we get through them all? So,
You're muted, Aaron.
Yeah, he's dealing with dogs.
oh yes, okay. So, I mean, well, if that was all of them, there was one thing I did want to say with regards to like this section of the text that I do find kind of historically interesting. In that, and relative to like some of the settlement models that archaeologists and scholars develop with regards to the region, it is kind of interesting the acknowledgement within the text that not just Israel but these other places too, right? Like the Edomites and the Moabites and the Ammonites they've all dispossessed people who lived there before them, right? And this kind of looks like it could it could preserve sort of an historical memory of stuff that we actually know happened from the period in particular around the 12th century, there was like a huge migration of people from out of the the north, the Anatolian Empire, which was collapsing, out of Mycenae, which was collapsing, out of Assyria and Babylon, which were suddenly becoming significantly weakened, and Egypt for that matter. But there was like a huge influx of people into this area. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting to me that even this is a late text, like we're talking at the earliest sometime around Hezekiah. And I was going to say too, some scholars think that Deuteronomy might actually have come into Jerusalem during the reign of Hezekiah. A form of Deuteronomy came into Jerusalem with refugees from the north when the Assyrians destroyed the city of Samaria, which is kind of intriguing too. But anyways, it's interesting that at this late time when this was written, there might even be some sort of historical memory at work here, you know, just with the tacit acknowledgement that this entire region in which we're living is a place that was populated through massive migration.
All right,
So
I apologize, but Dr. Kip, the person that I was talking about a moment ago, just
Yeah.
posted 4 more tweets, not
Oh,
knowing
good.
that we're having this conversation. I'm sure there are 4
That's
more
awesome.
tweets. I'm going to just run through them real quick. People have gone to
Okay.
Sodom and Gomorrah and filled themselves finding and digging out pure sulfur balls, aka brimstones, embedded into the ashen walls. They then burn the balls, and it also had it lab tested to show that it's pure, unlike anything else found on planet Earth.
Is this so? I'm
Sure,
interested. Like,
Atomic
Dan.
sulfur?
is this a Tel HaAman, which I believe is the sort of popular place right now to be identified with Sodom, or is this somewhere else?
I think
Because
this
I
is
yes,
have no
probably
idea. This is
someone.
just someone who thinks they're challenging me by
yeah,
bringing up shit nobody ever heard of. The next comment. Additionally, the brimstones are only found at the sites of Sodom and Gomorrah and are not found anywhere in several miles outside and or between the cities. So that's evidence those cities were specially targeted. Eusebius wrote
Mm.
about seeing Lot's wife as the pillar of salt.
Oh god, the Lot's pillar. Yeah, I mean, I
Fourth,
think Josephus also
the 4th
mentioned
century.
there. Yeah,
You
hold
All
on.
right.
But I think Josephus also mentioned the pillar. I mentioned it actually on the
Aren't
chapter
there
on
pillars?
Sodom.
Aren't there pillars that like random, like lots of random pillars of different
Yeah,
shapes
yeah,
and
that's a
stuff?
salt pillar. Yes,
Well,
Yeah.
how would you know which one was Lot's wife? I mean, and yeah, and which one was Lot's side chick and so forth. Okay, so
And the
I mean,
fly.
it's
the
just
next comment is
this works in the other direction too, right? Like, it's just such a great explanation from why, you know, people thought she was turned into a pillar of salt. Like, look at all
The whole
these salt
story seems to be an
formations around us that look like
explanation.
people.
The whole story
I
seems to
don't
be
want
like,
to
why
I
is
don't
there
want to
a
deviate.
I
salty
think
sea?
yes,
Oh,
we are
sorry.
deviating.
No, but
Yeah.
I don't want to deviate further. I just want to get out these last two.
Sure.
2,000 years ago, during Jesus's time, I think it was Eusebius. Could be wrong about the historian, but I know one did. They also tested the ash and chemical makeup is that of burned limestone, which is historically used building material, proving they were man-made walls.
What? So they tested it during Jesus' time?
Yeah, you know, all those chemists in the 1st century with all their
Yeah.
complex.
Yeah. And then the final comment, I hope
know
this is the
that.
final comment. Archaeologists also discovered cemeteries filled with millions of bodies. Millions! Archaeologists have also discovered cemeteries filled with millions of bodies. So that evidence they were heavily populated cities, not just ziggurat-shaped earthen mounds. Oh, and nothing
So
at
this
all
is
grows there as was written about thousands of years ago.
So that's still Sodom and Gomorrah, right?
Who the fuck knows what this person is ranting on
Millions.
about? I'll have to wait till they sober up and then ask them.
They're not going to sober
Millions.
up. This is a mentally unstable person who has taken on David Wyatt, or it probably they also
Ron
believe
Wyatt.
in Ron Wyatt. Sorry,
Oh yeah.
I'm very, bleh. But or probably they believe some of the crazy shit Jack Chick pulled out of his ass during his conspiracy theory phases. Like this is someone who heard a guy say a thing that totes for real happened to his cousin's best friend's boyfriend's girlfriend.
So what's really funny for me, and we'll get back to the show in just a moment. What's really funny for me, I get these kind of trolls when you try to call them out on anything where there's any kind of accountability at all. Let's have a written thing where you commit to providing your evidence, or let's get on video and show your no, they will waste all my fucking time as long as they can remain anonymous.
Of course.
Yeah.
You guys, speaking of Jack Chick, you guys are aware that Jack Chick Day is November 22nd, aren't you? So
Jack Chick gets the day.
Apparently.
I can understand when Texas has the holiday ZZ Top Day. That makes sense.
That's a good one, though. Yeah.
Jack Chick doesn't deserve a day.
No.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm also sorry.
Arn, on ZZ Top Day, do we all go out as sharp-dressed men?
Hey.
Sorry.
With cheap sunglasses.
Right, Thomas, say it.
All right,
Yeah,
now I'm
I
going to read a couple of comments. Sailman offers $1.99 and says, "Hey, Aaron, would you ever read Dante's Inferno? I'm sure I would, especially after I go to one of these places where you eat the really, really, really hot shit, and then you have to take a really, really, really hot shit. That's a good time to read Dante's Inferno."
Although I would say before Dante's Inferno, you kind of have to read the Apocalypse of Peter.
Mm-hmm.
Fine, Mr. Scholar. Then Moonlight says, "Here I thought the best way to read this book was high as a kite." I'm sure that works too. Then Matt White says, at Lilith Liberated, Voltaire on his deathbed asked if he would now denounce Satan, said, "This is no time to start making enemies."
She's not here.
So, can I just share something about Jack Chick Day?
Please.
Sure.
So, can I share my screen?
Oh, Lilith is
Oh,
back.
certainly. Peter?
All right.
We don't have an
There we
option
go.
for that. We don't have an
Oh,
option.
no?
For that.
Okay. So I picked this up from, you guys should really watch it if you haven't. There's a great documentary made about Jack Chick called God's Cartoonist.
Is this one? Did I hear you right that you made?
No. This was a documentary made a number of years ago.
Okay.
Called God's Cartoonist. I think they might have invented Jack Chick Day, but they said that November 22nd is International Chick Tract Day. And you're supposed to do 3 things on Chick Tract Day. The first one is use an outdated expression to try to sound hip, like far out. The second thing you're supposed to do is laugh hard at something that isn't funny. Ha, ha, ha. And then the third thing you're supposed to do is leave a tract for someone who is least likely to have any interest in Christianity. So,
Oh my God.
I tell you sincerely, the first time I saw a Chick Tract, I was 8 years old.
yeah.
And somebody had come over, like, I guess auditioning for a babysitter job. My mother was needing to hire somebody to, she was working in these, but whatever it was, somebody comes into our apartment, my mom's apartment, and we're in like Los Angeles, California, 1971. And this person left a Chick Tract. They come to apply for a job as babysitter and leave Chick Tract, which automatically should disqualify you as babysitter.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm reading this thing as an 8-year-old. It insulted my intelligence.
They'll
I was
all do
deeply
that.
worried that my mother didn't understand why this comic book was so fucking stupid.
Yeah.
I have one little thing to say. Aaron, you read a chick tract with the channel formerly known as the Bible Reloaded. Was then Hugo and Jake Hugo's transes, now out as Hannah. And they haven't done a lot of, but when they started their chick tract thing, I was still a Christian. And laughing at the stupidity of certain forms of Christianity that I had distanced myself from, the extreme weird shit, helped me work my way out psychologically. So those guys really helped me, and you really helped me, because just I needed to laugh at it, and the part of the process for me was that, and it was really important, because I also did read some of those tracts as a child. I don't remember which ones. I think they were normal hellfire and damnation ones, not the ones where the weird conspiracy theories about Islam and the Catholic Church. But still, it's they're so screwed up, and like he went so far off the rails because he got conned by this compulsive liar who just kept doubling down, and Chick went with him all the way down into the conspiracy theories. So he went from, evolution is a lie, blah, 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 to, and, you Jesus or you burn in hell, which is, shitty, but standard, to the Jesuits are a secret organization of the Catholic Church that are destroying all the other, and only the King James Version is true, and they've been framing him, and it's all a conspiracy, and like just all the way down. And then they secretly started the Mormons and the Masons and the Nazis and the Catholic Church, obviously, the great evil, blah blah blah. Like he just went totally tinfoil hat, man on the street screaming into a cup all the way. And I had to laugh to work my way further away from that.
Thank you for sharing that, Lilith. All right, we return to our regularly scheduled
Yes,
program.
I haven't finished my
sorry.
commentary. There you go. I said it. Yeah, thank you, Peter. Yeah. Of course. Okay, so yes, Isaac.
I was saying, did you actually finish till 23 though?
I still have two more.
Oh, okay.
So verse 20 about Zamzumim. These are the Zuzim in Genesis 14.
Zumi? What?
Zamzumim, Aaron, please.
It's what dogs get, Arn.
Mm-hmm. So these are the Zuzim in Genesis 14:5. Ibn Ezra writes that Zamzumim is a foreign term which was Hebraized, with the end being in Hebrew. Chizkuni writes that the Ammonites are called Zamzumim because, quote, they were always implicated in a war or in the planning of a war, end quote. And I have no idea how he got that. Nelson writes...
I think it's Zama or something like that.
Maybe. Zamam, maybe. The roots I'm in. So Nelson writes that the name sounds onomatopoeic as buzz people, and perhaps it is a reference to their unintelligible speech of eerie and supernatural sounds. And Weinfeld notes the Arabic zumzama, which means distant, confused sound. And on
it's like
verse
barbarians.
Perhaps. On verse 23, finally, kaftor, that is written in the Hebrew Bible, at least. I think it's in NIV as well. But so Tigay comments, these are presumably the Philistines who are said to come from Kaftor in Amos 9:7, Jeremiah 47:4, and apparently in Genesis 10:14. Kaftor is an island or coastland in the area of the Aegean Sea. Most scholars think that the evidence, such as Zephaniah 2:5, where the Philistines are called Kerethites or Cretans, point to Crete and the surrounding islands, though some think that it is an area on the coast of Asia Minor. A few think that it refers to both, end quote. Most early translations render it Cappadocia, and Weinfeld writes that this was caused by the misspelling Kaftoch, which is the Akkadian name for Cappadocia. McCarthy suggested that this was just a guess, at least by the Septuagint. Saadia Gaon renders Damietta, which is located at the eastern distributor of the Nile Delta, although I highly question it. And that's it for my part.
But again, if if the Kaftorim are indeed the Philistines, there's a preservation here of potentially an accurate historical memory, because the Philistines were part of the sea people who came from the Aegean.
It seems like there was a huge influx of people from every direction except Egypt.
I mean, it could be
Like,
but not
everywhere,
as
just not
massively
there.
as Exodus describes, right?
No, I don't know if mine is so. My own personal take on this is that the Exodus traditions got to Israel from Egypt. So I think there probably was an Egyptian contingent of some sort, whether they were runaway slaves or not, who ended up in this region and brought some of this stuff with them. So, like, yeah, but like everyone was kind of coming in from all over the place.
You can continue this chapter. I mean, you can finish this chapter. Kip.
Oh, you want me to keep reading?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, I like this. Up, set out across Wadi Arnon. See, I give it into your power, Sihon, the Ammonite king of Heshbon, and his land. Begin the Sorry, am I in the right place?
Yes,
You said
I think so.
Ammonite.
Yeah.
You said Ammonite instead of Amorite.
Amorite. Whoops, sorry. Yes, begin the occupation. Engage him in battle. This day I begin to put the dread and fear of you upon the peoples everywhere under heaven, so that they shall tremble and quake because of you whenever they hear you mentioned. Then I sent messengers from the wilderness of Kedemoth to King Sihon of Heshbon with an offer of peace as follows. Let me pass through your country. I will keep strictly to the highway, turning off neither to the right nor the left. What food I eat, you will supply for money, and what water I drink, you will furnish for money. Just let me pass through, as the descendants of Esau, who dwelt in Seir, did for me, and the Moabites who dwell in Ar, that I may cross the Jordan into the land that Yahweh, our God, is giving us. But King Sihon of Heshbon refused to let us pass through, because Yahweh had stiffened his will and hardened his heart in order to deliver him into your power, as is now the case. And Yahweh said to me, so I begin by placing Sihon and his land at your disposal. Begin the occupation, take possession of his land. Sihon and all his men took the field against us at Yahaz, and Yahweh our God delivered him to us, and we defeated him and his sons and all his men. At that time we captured all his towns, and we doomed every town, men, women, and children, leaving no survivor. We retained as booty only the cattle and the spoil of the cities that we captured. From Aroer on the edge of the Arnon Valley, including the town in the valley itself, to Gilead. Not a city was too mighty for us. Yahweh our God delivered everything to us, but you did not encroach upon the land of the Ammonites, all along the Wadi Yabuk and the towns of the hill country, just as Yahweh our God had commanded.
Should have built a wall.
It's funny how God does things. I mean, when he wants to create 70 jillion galaxies. He just, I guess, snaps his fingers, blinks, or wiggles his nose. But when he wants some trivial thing done, like a city overtaken, well, then there's a lot of swords and bleeding and injury and all that has to go on. It's funny how there seems to be a double standard for that sort of thing.
Some things you do on the main map, some things you do on the campaign map.
Okay.
Like the video game.
Okay, I'll start. Verse 26, I sent messengers offering peace. So Weinfeld comments, this stands in contradiction to verse 24, where Moses is commanded to start war with Sichon. The rabbis indeed saw in Moses' offer of peace an act that was not commissioned by God, in Numbers Rabbah 5:13. Nachmanides takes the initial verb as a pluperfect, after I had sent away messengers. In other words, God commanded Moses to start war with Sichon after the latter rejected the terms of peace. The request to pass through Sichon's territory was a mere pretext aimed at provoking war, for God knew in advance that Sichon would not let the Israelites pass through his territory.
So where was what verse was it that he thought the
26.
perfect? 26.
Yes.
Yeah, it's almost like the two stories got mixed up, where one has this one, for example, has I sent a message to Sichon and then he didn't let us in and we fought him, and it doesn't say, and it even seems to say that with Edom, they were able to pass through, or they were able to get money from them or whatever. There was no issues. But then if we look back at, was it Exodus or Leviticus, it's the opposite, right? Or not the opposite, but they're like, God tells them to destroy this one, and then they ask to go through with the Edomite king instead. So it's like, seems that things are like moving around almost between these two stories. Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly a swap, but yeah.
Now on verse
Maybe.
30, Nelson comments.
Oh, definitely.
Verse 30, Nelson comments, verse 30 reports Sichon's reaction. In the context of the Exodus tradition, the hardening of his heart associates Sichon with Pharaoh, whose heart Yahweh also hardened. Spirit, Hebrew ruach, refers to Sichon's attitude and emotions. Heart, lev, to his will and mind. The motif of Yahweh hardening hearts in order to lure enemies into destruction also occurs in Joshua 11:20. Repetition of the verb give with Yahweh as subject, as in verses 30, 31, 33, and 36, shows that Yahweh is in control of the events that follow. The formula, as is now the case, literally as at this day, refers to the dramatic today, quote unquote, of Deuteronomy as a speech of Moses. On verse 34, the men here, in Hebrew, at least in the NIV, in Hebrew it's mitim. The Targums, followed by Rashi and Ibn Ezra, render people, with Tigay noting the Ugaritic met and Akkadian mutu, all meaning man, husband, and warrior. Septuagint renders it in order, and Nelson explains that it construed from mitim from the root taf mem mem, which means be complete. This is similar in the Peshitta, which renders completely. It's a very strange word to describe.
It really
men.
is.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah. So yeah, I've got just a handful of occurrences here in Deuteronomy 2:34, 3:6, Judges 20:48, Isaiah 3:25. But yeah, it's an unusual word.
Yes. And finally,
wait, is it? There's also in the same verse. There's also the word for like we doomed them or whatever is put them in cherem.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I have an extended comment on this in chapter. I don't know if it's 3 or 4, but I expanded on this on another chapter.
On cherem?
Yes, the term cherem.
Yeah, I'm missing something. So the way to doom somebody is to put them in a harem?
I think it's more closely related to the Arabic Muslim word haram.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Similar.
Yeah, as in forbidden.
Or it's
similar.
The way it's used in like Judaism is actually a bit like a fatwa, although a negative fatwa. that
That's
the
a
way
very
we use it in
strange. Like
English.
it's
As
like a
opposed to a
ban.
positive fatwa?
Apparently, the
yeah,
word fatwa can be used to just mean a decree. It doesn't necessarily mean like fatwa against someone. It's also used in like to be a fatwa to say these people are okay. You can't kill them. For example, there was a fatwa by some Egyptian ruler a long time ago to say that the Druze are Muslims, even though other Muslims disagreed with them and the Druze disagree with them. So it's more like in the case. So cherem is kind of like excommunication.
Yes.
It's how it's used in a more modern sense. Like we put someone cherem means to be like this person is
To
we
ban or
don't
boycott. Yes.
boycott.
Yeah, it's usually within the biblical text, it's usually translated as the ban or devoted object,
Yes,
which I
it
think
can be for devotion as well to Yahweh as well.
yeah. And I think that I mean when I work through a lot of these texts, I think that properly encapsulates um more what's going on here, where haram is a type of it's a type of ritual war or killing, which is not altogether very different from like a sacrifice. So if a city is declared as haram to Yahweh, it's a devotion to him, and within an ancient Near Eastern theory of sacrifice, the gods take possession of things within the natural world through their destruction. So the only way basically to get it from the 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 natural realm into the realm of the gods is to destroy it. So that's why when these commands are given throughout Deuteronomy and in particular in Joshua, the total destruction of everything is so important because it's it's an offering in a manner of speaking.
I was about to say, because that phrasing, because my studies of the Bible have only been in English, because
Mm.
sorry, but that phrase dedicated unto the Lord, specifically dedicated unto the Lord by fire, is oh, look at the pretty danger noodle, is totally something that keeps being repeated over and over again. And specifically, I mean, there was the incident in Jericho, which obviously we'll come to reasonably soon, where everything is burned and the one guy takes like a handful of booty, and they you lose, and God gets so mad they lose a battle,
Yeah.
find him by lot, and then murder him and his entire family and everything he owns and bury them under stones, because you were supposed to burn everything to God. And this guy took a handful of silver in a robe, so God had a hissy fit because he's
Yeah.
very modest and moderate and just and reasonable and merciful and all that other good shit.
So
Infinite loving mercy and forgiveness.
yeah.
Burn
I'm actually-
everything.
I'm actually doing a stream on Friday about violence in the Old Testament, and one of the things that I'm sort of setting my focus on has to do with this idea, right? With understanding what haram is, but also recognizing that it's not so like there are also in particular in your English Bibles, there's all sorts of places in Joshua, especially where it talks about annihilating everybody, right? But not every single one of those instances are haram. There's lots of different Hebrew words that could be used for total destruction or killing. Um, but the haram seems to be sort of singular and sort of unique. And one of the things that you'll hear from apologists with regards to trying to excuse at least the concept of mass genocide, it's important to note that thankfully none of this actually happened. But in terms of trying to excuse at least the concept of mass genocide, a comment you'll often hear, an excuse you'll often hear is that, well, this is all just hyperbole. It's hyperbolic language. We see similar sorts of things throughout all sorts of other ancient Near Eastern texts. So even though they do say, yes, totally kill everyone, they didn't really mean that everybody died, or that it was supposed to be
Right.
that extensive.
And
However,
hamstring all their horses.
yeah, see, this is where you
Which
you
is
start
just
to get into
stupid.
problems, because when it comes to Haram in particular, it's very difficult to legitimate that this is just a half measure or an exaggeration when you recognize that this is a devotion and an offering to Yahweh. There can't be any half measures when it comes to
Yeah.
No.
committing.
Isn't there a psalm or a proverb about like not fully giving the devotion to Yahweh? Like if you only give like part
God gets
of it,
pissy about half
it's
measures.
not. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not like it doesn't count,
Yeah.
right? I could
And
swear there was.
that's the whole point of the Achan story, right? Like, because he held back just a little bit, and it
You
wasn't
said
even,
you're-
it was some
You
silver
said you're
bars
doing a
and a quote,
stream.
right?
You said you're doing a stream this Friday.
Yeah. So it's 9 a.m. Pacific, I think, on the Free Thinker podcast.
That sounds
That's
awesome.
Tyler Vela. He used to be a Christian apologist.
Okay.
Oh.
so-
Tyler
but,
Vela used to be a Christian apologist.
Yeah.
I'm
Used to
glad
be.
he got out.
That's the
Yeah.
guy that I debated like 2 years ago.
Maybe, but yeah, he's
That
come
is
around.
fascinating to me.
You did it, Aaron. Good job.
He woke
Way
up.
to go.
That's wonderful. I'm so happy. He got his stealth back. That's wonderful. Yeah, you have to
So-
subject your reason to all these thought control techniques. It's really awful, and it's soul destroying and awful. And I'm very glad he
Do-
got out.
Do please include a link so that I can share.
Oh,
so I
yeah,
can share it
sure.
in the
Please.
description.
Well, I don't think there's one up yet. He tends to
Okay.
be a little bit slow in getting
I just
those
wanted
up.
to add
Channel
but
link, maybe.
Yeah.
I'll throw in the channel link.
For
But,
those of us who have neglected to learn ancient Hebrew, shame on us. When we see, is there something we can look for where it says haram? Is that when they say dedicated unto the Lord or dedicated unto the Lord by fire?
I think I'll get to it
that word?
the word appears in Deuteronomy again. I think in not 5. It's later on. I have an
But
extensive
it'll appear
comment
a lot in Joshua.
Yeah, I have an extensive comment
Oh.
by Lundbom regarding the cherem, which I don't remember exactly where I put it, but yeah, it's in my notes, but I don't remember the chapter exactly. I have one final comment on this chapter about the town in the gorge in verse 36. So Lundbom comments, it was a city in the Arnon Gorge, always mentioned in connection with Aroer, which Joshua 39, which appears in Joshua 13 verses 9 and 16 and 2 Samuel 24:5. Freidbert Nino has recently, i.e. 2002, identified it with Khirbet al-Mamarie, which lies in the middle of the Arnon Valley. The site is unexcavated, but preliminary examination has turned up substantial fortifications and pottery from the late Bronze and Iron Ages.
Oh, cool.
Very cool.
That's fun.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Maybe the usage of the city without a name could imply that it was like uninhabited at the time. Maybe, like, they knew about a city, but they didn't know too much about it.
Yeah. Shall we continue to Deuteronomy 3?
I would like to.
There's
I
some
see
comments.
some comments though. Do you want
All right,
to
I will.
read it
I'll
first?
read. I'll take over reading unless somebody else wants to volunteer.
I think maybe after the comments.
Yes. Read the comments.
Oh
first.
yes. Thank you. Zachary Beck says, which legends were borrowed for this particular book of the Bible, or was this one purely fan fiction?
Oh boy. So this is always a really loaded question. So it would be hard to say that this stuff was like stolen from something, like there are clearly hints of older theologies and a much older context within it, but some of these things would have come from, and at least in this book, some of these things would have come from their own experience in like the past, 300, 400, 500 years, right? But then the thing is, when telling those stories, they very often, you see it way more in Genesis, they reuse a lot of motifs in Mesopotamian literature, because that's just how storytelling was. So they repurposed mythologies to kind of get like a point across. And in many cases, I don't think it was meant to be taken literally. Like there's a separate golden calf tradition in Deuteronomy as well. And I think when we went over the golden calf, I covered that one, as well as the calves of Jeroboam. So that's always like a complicated question, because some of this wouldn't even really be called it's hard to call some of it myth. A lot of it is, I would definitely put under legend, but it has to be, we have to realize how like ancient histories were written back then. They liked to give legendary accounts, legendary origins for like things in the modern day. And you see this in Hellenistic literature, you see it in Egypt, you see it in Mesopotamian literature, you see it everywhere. This is just a thing that they like to do, and that's how they either legitimize like kingships or their inheritance or whatever it may be. They used it for a lot of reasons. And the thing is, it changes from time to time because it's malleable, because the purpose is malleable. So a question like that is, I always find it's pretty loaded.
Yeah, it's as I understand it, and I'm the very simplified, the Deuteronomist source, broadly speaking, was Yahweh supremacists who were writing but repurposing history and legend and law at various points, and to meet their political needs at that time. It was politically motivated. Not to say they invented everything. This is not Genesis. This is not, you're not taking, the flood myths or things like that that are big. You have local specific traditions of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the tribal names and tribal histories and legends and laws. But their political goals at that time appear to have been, again, broadly, to promote Yahweh alone worship as what always should have been and always was in Israel. Don't let anyone tell you differently. And also the supporting of the like Hezekiah and Josiah. Those two kings are their like champions, if you will, because they were pro kill everybody who doesn't worship Yahweh, or at least their priests. Ish.
I was gonna add to that. That's mostly right. I was gonna add, it's not just Yahweh exclusivism, but one of the very important features of Deuteronomy and the Deuteronomists is the centralization of worship of Yahweh in the temple in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
One of the things that Josiah, one of the things that you see replete throughout Deuteronomy in particular is the repeated command that you shall only worship Yahweh in the place where his name dwells. Something that Josiah does in his reforms is not just eradicates the worship of other gods, but he also destroys other centers of Yahweh worship outside of Jerusalem.
Like the high places.
Yeah, and even I would even argue, like, one of the interesting things about the shrines at Bethel and Dan, like Jeroboam set these up not as places for people to go and worship other gods. He set these up as centers of Yahweh worship so that people from the northern kingdom didn't have to go to Jerusalem.
Yeah, so that all their wealth wouldn't flow into taxes in Judah, where wouldn't you know it, Josiah and Hezekiah are and would very much like all the taxes to flow to them. Thank you. No, I totally had forgotten about that. But because I always thought with the bulls, because the golden calves and bulls or whatever at Dan and Beersheba, was that Yahweh worship or was that El worship? Because El, the Canaanite El, wasn't he a bull or his symbol was a bull?
Yes.
Yes.
But there's a reason to think that it could have been Yahweh. So we don't know. There's so much we don't know about Yahwism in
No, fair enough.
in
I mean,
the
a
early
lot
period,
of stuff
right?
was
Like,
burned.
Yeah.
and I mean,
think
there's
it would make. Go ahead, finish.
no.
that.
I was just gonna say what just to finish up on my end. There's the problematic interchange between Yahweh and Baal. Seems like it was a thing, right? So
Definitely.
was Jezebel really, the wicked witch of the West who worshipped Baal, or was she just
If you take like
I don't know.
extremist pastors of the bent of an Elijah type, your Greg Locks and stuff, they seem to think that anyone, a woman or anyone like me who has thoughts and speaks and just generally does anything other than make them a sandwich and suck them off, is Satan incarnate. And I have sold myself to the devil, and I'm here to destroy all men and something evil. So,
Shall we move on to the next comment?
Well, probably, yeah. I was gonna hit on what Kip said, but I think I covered it in the Exodus episode on it.
Okay. So Hive Sai asks Kip Davis, did Moses really write all these stories about how important, but also how very humble he is?
Obviously.
He sounds like
So
it's
important so listen, I mean, one of the things that we need to continue to point out here is that this, like, even within the text like Deuteronomy, which has really the only claim out of all of the Torah texts, like internal claim to Mosaic authorship, this is still reported speech. Like, this isn't Moses writing in the first person. This is like imagined as like a recorder. So somebody's like, well, Yahweh, Moses then said this, and this stuff happened. So, like, even within the text, if you read carefully, even Moses isn't claiming to all this stuff for himself. This is other people writing very obviously. It's good to see you, Bree.
one other comment, and that is Aunt Jer, I'm not sure, says Tyler Vela is still basically a Christian. I saw his interview with Shannon Q. He still sounded pretty Christian, just more vague and evasive. Well, that's actually a couple of stages of progress, because he described himself as a presuppositionalist to me.
it's possible he's working his way out, and I hope he is. I hope he frees his mind.
All right, are we going to attempt this?
Yeah, we got time.
Yeah, I
Yes,
think.
All
I
right.
think we
Because I have some notes. If you get through verse 12, we can
All right.
chill out there.
I will get
Oh.
through verse 12.
Okay.
When we headed up the road to Bashan, King Og of Bashan came out against us, he and all his people, for battle at Divrey. The Lord said to me, do not fear him, for I have handed him over to you, along with his people and his land. Do to him as you did to King Sihon of the Amorites, who reigned in Heshbon. So the Lord our God also handed over to us King Og of Bashan and all his people. We struck him down until not a single survivor was left. At that time, we captured all his towns. There was no citadel that we did not take from them. 60 towns, the whole region of Argob, the kingdom of Og in Bashan. All these were fortresses with high walls, double gates, and bars, besides a great many villages. And we utterly destroyed them as we had done to King Sihon of Heshbon, in each city, utterly destroying men, women, and children. But all the livestock and plunder of the towns we kept as spoil for ourselves. So at that time, we took the 2 kings of the Amorites to the land beyond the Jordan, from Wadi Arnon to Mount Hermon. The Sidonians call Hermon Sarion, while the Amorites call it Senir. All the towns of the tableland, the whole of Gilead, all of Bashan, as far as Salakai and Edrei, towns of Og's kingdom of Bashan. Now, only King Og of Bashan was left in the remnant of the Rephaim. In fact, his bed, an iron bed, can still be seen in Rabbah and of the Ammonites. By the common cubit, it is 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide. As for the land, we took possession of at that time. I gave to the Reubenites and the Gadites the territory north of Aror, that is on the edge of Wadi Arnon, as well as half the hill country of Gilead with its towns. Where did you want me to read to?
It's through verse 12.
Okay.
So, yeah, a few things here. Partially noted before about the Rephaim, right? They were these giants. So Joshua, in Joshua 12:4, it also describes Og as being one of the last of the Rephaim, and it says that he reigned in Ashtaroth and Idrei, and Idrei, of course, is in verse 1 here. So the importance of this, I actually think, is I'm going to cite here. So Francesco Stavrakopoulos' book, The Land of Our Fathers, has a really interesting section on this. So, as well as being described as the last survivor of the Rephaim, Og of Bashan is said to dwell in Ashtaroth and Edrei. These toponyms are identical to the Ugaritic name of the netherworld location, Ateret Hidrei, the royal residence of Rapiu, king of the hereafter, who is probably best understood as the eponymous figurehead of the Rapim, the royal deified dead. While this close paralleling of biblical and Ugaritic texts might suggest that Og is to be identified with Rapiu, the underworld character of Og's kingdom is also of particular relevance. So I noted, actually I don't even, did I note how there seems to be this this kind of connection between the Rephaim and them kind of inhabiting the dead. I'm not sorry, the land of the dead. I'm not sure if I did. So he could, I guess I should know the size of his bed is actually kind of important here.
Yes,
so
it is.
this is there has been, like, when it comes to like Mosaic authorship, right? Like, first of all, how the hell would Moses know the size of his bed? So like that was like historically been indicative of non-Mosaic authorship.
I can think of one way.
Also, the cubits given for it means it's about 14 feet long and 6 feet wide. So once again, we have this issue of Og being a giant, but also
not as big as the other tradition where Moses was 10 cubits tall, jumped 10 cubits, and then had an axe of 10 cubits and only hit.
Yeah,
his
not
ankle.
that quite not quite that big. So it also could be understood his bed as being his grave, since Rephaim inhabit the realm of the dead.
Yes, it could be, but
it could be.
Yeah, there is contention about this, and I'll mention it in my commentary.
Right. Yeah. So to my understanding, Francesca in her book, she quotes Isaiah 26:14-15. Where it says, well, at least in verse 14, they are now dead, they live no more, their spirits do not rise. But to my understanding, in the consonantal text, spirits can also be read as Rephaim. Is that accurate?
I mean, yes. I mean, in modern Hebrew, you have Ochot Rephaim, which literally means ghosts. But
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so she that's what she was
biblical.
building off of on that one. And interestingly, just to note, so Ephraim Stern actually says that the Bashan was inhabited until the Assyrian conquest, but it wasn't rebuilt afterwards as so many other cities were. So if you're talking about them being in the realm of the dead and them just taking over the land, like they were already dead, which is why they took over.
Yeah,
right?
I should I should mention real quick, BDB Dictionary has Rephaim also as plural for shades or ghosts,
Right. Yeah.
wisdom
Mhm.
literature, and late
Yep.
name of dead in Sheol.
Right. Yeah.
Mm.
So, yeah, if we're coming at this like, you know, at least sometime after the Assyrian invasion, then, you know, them being like, oh well, we're taking over this land now, but these guys were gone a long, you know, some time ago, right? Because of God, then that would kind of fit in with that dating, because that was one of the cities that was not rebuilt. So yeah, that was
Aaron is right. God does all the coolest stuff when nobody's looking, but he totes for real did it, guys. Totes for real. Realsies.
Yeah, during the Bronze Age, before we have any writings or whatever the word is.
Yeah. Yeah. Legit.
Okay, I'll start my commentary on here. Verse 4 about 60 cities. Tigay argued that 60 is a round typological number, since Agub in Solomon's time is said to have 60 cities in 1 Kings 4:13, and it is unlikely that the number of cities remained unchanged for more than 2 centuries. And verse 5, unwalled villages, in Hebrew it's arei haperazi. While this term refers to unwalled cities in other biblical texts, like 1 Samuel 6:18, Ezekiel 38:11, and Esther 9:19, the Septuagint misunderstood perazi and translated it cities of the Perizzites, which is one of the 7 Canaanite nations.
Oh yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
As is the Amorites sometimes.
Yeah.
Which
Verse
is
9.
why
Sorry.
it's confusing why Moses would ask their king to let them go through and not kill them outright, as they are one of the nations that they're supposed to kill.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I have a God
sorry.
who likes genocide a little less? Or maybe not at all? I would like a less
Sorry.
genocide-y God.
Yahweh's the
Maybe
best we can do.
Yeah. Nah, I'm out.
About verse 9, Rashi notes that Mount Hermon has 4 names, including Sion in Deuteronomy 4:48. Why must they all be mentioned? He answers, to tell the praise of the land of Israel, since 4 kings prided themselves in it, and each one wished to name the mountain after himself. But I have Tigay's comment here. He writes, the name Sirion and its variant Senir both appear elsewhere in the Bible and in ancient Near Eastern texts, though in these sources they do not seem to be used as exact synonyms of Hermon. In many sources, these terms are parallel to Lebanon and may indicate the anti-Lebanon range, and not just its southern region. However, Senir is sometimes different from Hermon, as seen in Song of Songs 4:8 and 1 Chronicles 5:23, and in Arabic sources, and maybe even Akkadian, it could indicate the northern region of the anti-Lebanon range. It could be that these names were used in narrow and broad senses and possibly used for different parts of the mountains during different periods. Now, on verse 11, first of all, I have 3 notes on verse 11. First of all, about his bed. So the Hebrew is eres. Nelson writes that the reference to Og's bed is intended to boost the text's trustworthiness and believability. If one doubts that he was one of the Rephaim, one should look at his bed. Now, Weinfeld proposed that bed, yes. Weinfeld proposed that bed refers to a sarcophagus. Nelson and Lundbom, however, reject this interpretation, since there's no evidence that eres means sarcophagus. Chizkuni and Bechor Shor render eres as fortress, and wrote that the materials used in constructing the city walls were as sturdy as if they had been made from strong metal. However, there's no evidence to support his rendition.
It's a small fortress then.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, it's banned by Lilliputians. Sorry, but I had a question. Again, had a cold for a week. My brain is not top notch right now. But why do I have the feeling that this Og of Bashan and his bed had the same myth that the Scots had about someone who'd like put people on the bed, and if they were too short, you'd stretch them out, and if they were too tall, you'd cut off their head or something.
That's a story about Sodom that I think I've mentioned it before.
That wasn't about Og's bed. Maybe it's just the mentioning of a bed, which was, oh, hello, pretty.
Yeah. There is a story about the people of Sodom and Gomorrah was so bad to the guests that they would put the guest in a bed, and if the person was too short, they would stretch them, and if they were too tall, they'd cut off their legs.
Where is
talked
that
about this.
story?
It's in
Is it a
Genesis,
midrash?
I believe. Yes, it's a
yeah.
midrash. It's a midrash.
Yeah,
Is
I
it
think I
Genesis
talked about
Rabbah?
it I
Yeah.
think so. I can look it up real quick. If you
I
want me to.
doubt he got it from
Because
the
I'm
Scottish.
pretty sure there's
so-
like a Scotch fairy tale that has something similar with some evil king or sorcerer or whatever. Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know.
it's not much of a stretch, I guess.
Yeah, let me just check real quick. Okay, Sanhedrin. No, it's actually Talmud, Sanhedrin 190, a Procrustean bed. Yeah.
Oh,
A
okay.
Etruscan.
Procrustean. It's a Greek.
Procrustean.
Yeah, it
Oh.
resembles it. That's what I wrote, at least when it comes to
Mm.
Genesis 19. Okay, I'll come back to my commentary. About the cubits here. The end of the verse in the Hebrew Bible reads Be'amat ish, which literally means after the cubit of a man, as Ibn Ezra and KJV render it. Some commentators render standard cubit, which is circa 18 inches or 45.7 centimeters, and differentiate between it and the royal cubit, which was slightly longer. However, Targum Onkelos renders a king's cubit, and Targum Pseudo-Jonathan his, i.e. Og's, own cubit.
Either way, it's huge.
If he's a giant, that would be very big. Like,
Yeah,
the cubit is going to be.
But the thing is, if it's his cubit, then it doesn't really give him a size, but it does give him a proportion, which makes no sense.
No,
he would have an enormous Schwanstucker.
Or tiny T-Rex arms.
Yeah, I think it's Ibn Ezra says he would not have the image of a person at all. He didn't. Apparently, Ibn Ezra doesn't believe in big giants.
No, he was a rationalist.
Yeah, not. I think he thinks the maximum's 10 amas maybe, or even less. I don't know. Like Goliath, I think is maybe, or maybe it's on the maybe it's 4 amas. I don't remember. No, not 4 amas.
Yeah,
I have to wonder if there was any kernel of truth to the story of Goliath. Was there ever a Goliath on which any of this story was based? It would be fun to have a time machine and go back and find this guy and see how he was blown out of proportion, or show him how he was blown out of proportion.
I mean, a 6-foot man at that time would have been ridiculously big.
And it as was already mentioned, the Philistines. This is just a complete. I mean, this is just a regular group of people. It's just so any number of them that are tall.
It depends on what you mean by regular. I mean, you mean
they weren't giants.
They weren't giants, yes, but they were the sea people. I mean, it's interpreted as they're part of the sea people, right?
Right, but they
so
wouldn't.
It's not a race of giants. They're not all of them giant.
I don't think.
No.
I think once we'll get to 1 Samuel, then we'll talk about it because that's where the subject is.
Okay. I'll just shut up until then.
So my final comment on this part is it is still in Rabbah of the Ammonites. So Tigay comments, Scripture says that they used to show Og's bed in Rabbah of the Ammonites, much like how the relics attributed to historical and fictional figures are shown in many parts of the world. Another Transjordanian figure that the Bible attributes to the wilderness period is Balaam, son of Beor. His memory has been preserved in the book of Balaam, son of Beor, an inscription from the first half of the 8th century BCE found at Tel Dir Allah at the valley of Succoth in Transjordan. And it is possible that the people of the area preserved the memory of Og using a relic or a souvenir of some kind. It is unknown if they showed an actual bed or a different, larger object that could have been interpreted as a bed.
I mean,
maybe a large flat stone or something.
There's a slab in some cave that people of the quality of scholarship, as the gentleman who made the questions for Aaron, they're just 9 feet long or something, and they'll claim it's the burial place of Noah, and that's where he was buried, but it's just a slab, so he's not there anymore because magic or shit.
Yeah. Well, this is seems to be another example of the writers showing that it's written at a later time than Moses, because it's saying, his bedstead is now in
This is
Ammon.
something we
Seems
can look
to imply,
towards. Yeah.
yeah, like the writers are able to say, even now you can go see it. Yeah.
All right. Are we ready to jump in for me to jump in and finish this?
Yes, please.
Yep.
Okay. And I gave to the half tribe of Manasseh the rest of Gilead and all of Bashan, Og's kingdom, the whole region of Argob. All that portion of Bashan used to be called the land of Rephaim. Jer and Mizanite acquired a whole region of Argob as far as the border of Geshurites and
Ma'achatites. Ma'achatites.
Bless you. And he said, named them, and he named them, that is Bashan, after himself, Havoth Jair, as it is to this day. To Machir I gave Gilead, and to the Reubenites and the Gadites I gave the territory from Gilead as far as the Wadi Arnon, with the middle of Wadi as the boundary, and up to the Jabbok, the Wadi being the boundary of the Ammonites. The Arba also, with the Jordan and its banks from Chinnereth down to the Sea of Arabah, the Dead Sea, with the lower slopes of Pisgah on the east. At that time I charged you as follows: although the Lord your God has given you this land to occupy, all your troops shall cross over armed as the vanguard of your Israelite king. Only your wives, your children, and your livestock, I know that you have much livestock, shall stay behind in the towns that I have given you. When the Lord gives rest to your kindred as to you, and they too have occupied the land that the Lord has giving to them beyond the Jordan, then each of you may return to the property that I have given you. And I charged Joshua as well at that time, saying, your own eyes have seen everything that the Lord your God has done to these two kings. So the Lord will do to all the kingdoms unto which you are about to cross. Do not fear them, for it is the Lord your God who fights for you. You want me to continue?
Yes.
Okay. At that time, too, I entreated the Lord, saying, O Lord God, you have only begun to show your servant your greatness and your might, that God in heaven or on earth can perform deeds and mighty acts of yours, like yours. Let me cross over to see the good land beyond the Jordan, the good hill country and the Lebanon. But the Lord was angry with me on your account and would not heed me. The Lord said to me, enough from you. Never speak to me of this matter again. Go up to the top of Pisgah and look around you. Look around you to the west, to the north, to the south, to the east. Look well, for you shall not cross over the Jordan. But charge Joshua and encourage and strengthen him, because it is he who shall cross over the head of this people, and who will secure the possession of the land that you will see. So we remained in the valley opposite Beth Peor.
If anybody has something to say, if not, I'll just start.
I'm left.
Every
speechless.
time you might think he's not just being a total dick, God just reminds you that he's just such a dick.
There's one thing. So the word, for some reason, in the translation is Chinnereth. For the which is normally it's just called the Kinneret, which is the sea, and the name in English is normally the Sea of Galilee.
Yeah.
And I only read it like yesterday, but apparently the Sea of Galilee is like from some gospel or something, and it's an unidentified body of water, and then it was later connected with the Sea of with the Kinneret, the actual sea that's there, because it doesn't really, whatever story it was in, the Sea of Galilee is not actually there or something like that. Have you heard of something like this?
Sure. I gotta look here. Doesn't Doesn't the Sea of Galilee appear in? Well, no, it's just called the Galilee in Isaiah chapter 8,
Let me see.
verse
if it's-
23:9.
I swear it's
Yeah,
in one
so
of the
it's,
Gospels, right? So
The sea beyond Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles, the people who walked in
Yeah.
darkness.
Oh,
have seen
that's
a
in the.
great
I
light.
think that's in the Latin Vulgate.
Yeah,
That is
I'm
called sea.
remembering the Matthew quoting the Isaiah.
No, but yeah, in 8:23, it's
And that's on
the
the Greek.
way
Yeah.
of the sea, Hayom Ever Hayardein Galil.
in the New
Hagoyim.
Testament. In the New Testament, the term Sea of Galilee,
Yeah.
Thalassos tes Galileas,
Yeah.
Galileas, is used in the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, and John as the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. Okay, so so the Sea of Tiberias is the older name. So maybe I was getting confused. Maybe there is an older book that talks about Jesus traipsing around some part of Galilee, which is not near the actual Sea of Galilee, and also says the Sea of Galilee. And then there's a later.
He's supposed to
Yeah.
have been going around. The Sea of Galilee and Galilee are used almost interchangeably in the narratives, and it's at least it's one more thing that like honestly angles me more mythicist, because like I'm not saying there was never a dude, but these
Don't anger Lauren.
Gospels were just very clearly written by people who had never been to the area and are writing, especially in the case of Matthew, warping anything imaginable to fit the prophecies. And it's just, the cope is so hard.
yeah, the thing is, like, that wouldn't even be like a new thing for them, right? Because I in my view, a lot of the stuff in Genesis, for example, I think was reworkings of historical events, many of which are recorded in the Deuteronomistic history. So I think that it's not really like this completely, out of the question thing. But even for those things, like we can still find like historical cores for the stuff in the Deuteronomistic history, right? At least some of it, right? So, yeah, that
Some of
me,
it might have been like King Arthur level legend. It's hard to tell.
Sure, yeah. For like Moses, I think for him,
And even
like,
someone like
kind of national hero.
Samson and his jawbone and his
the judges
companion.
stuff, for sure. Yeah, no, totally, I get that. Yeah, definitely a lot of mythological stuff. But for some of it, we can actually, independently verify. And the kind of later you get, the more there is to be independently verified.
Fair, yeah, and no, and that's what makes it so questionable. Once you look into anything that's not written by hardcore Christians about this or origin, you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't fit with yeah. Like I said, I'm an agnostic mythicist. I'm not hardcore, into any particular conspiracy theory. I'm just kind of not convinced he was legit real.
Yeah,
I consider myself as having reasonable doubt.
There's a particular batshit crazy apologist named S.J. Thomason, who has been tweeting to me of late for the last couple of days, telling me about how Jesus has done all of these things to change the world. And I had to tell her, well, no, it wasn't actually Jesus did fuck all. Your first century fraudulent faith healer did almost nothing. It's the thousands of violently conflicting denominations that were established based on lies about him that changed the world for the worse, for my opinion.
Yeah, Paul had more influence on Christianity than Jesus if he lived.
Well, that's why I said the lies based on Jesus. Jesus had very little understanding of this. So I'm convinced, and Lawrence may argue with me. Maybe I'd like to hear Kip's position on this. If we had a TARDist and someone who spoke Aramaic, and we could go back in time and go hunt down this Jesus character, and if it was possible to find one guy, that's the first thing. Can we find just one guy on which all of these legends are based? Because I'm betting they're not all based on one person. But if there were one guy that all this shit was based on, and first of all, I doubt that very much. But if that were the case, if you could find one guy on which all of these legends, all of them, from all of the canonical gospels, all of the the infancy gospel, the Gospel of Thomas, all of that shit, all based on one fucking guy. Assuming that much, because I don't think that would be the case. If you could yoink him out of there and bring him forward in time and show him Jesus Christ Superstar or the Passion of the Christ, would
The
he
Chosen.
even recognize? Would he even recognize Christianity? Would he even know that the story is supposed to be about him?
Yeah, I mean, my view, you already know it. Like, I do think that there probably is one guy, but I think that if you did bring that person back, sorry, not back, if you brought that person forward in time, that person would not recognize any.
It's okay to say back because we have Back to the Future.
Fair enough. You're right. You're right.
Okay,
Kip,
I'll start. Sorry.
Kip, what would you say about that?
So I tend to think, I mean, part of, I guess, yeah, I tend to think there probably was a guy, and
What for
I'm
all of it?
Yeah, I think so. Like, and I'm comfortable with the development of the stories around this one guy when you recognize what the Gospels are, which they're not history in the way that we should think about history. This is theology, right? So they're inventing piles and piles of stuff, and then they're inventing things to solve problems for things that are difficult for them to account for and to accommodate. But I've said this. I think I did a video with Paulogia back in February where we talked about some of this, and I've maintained that whatever the Jesus movement was, whatever early the first Christianity was, it was thoroughly Jewish. It was a Jewish sect in Jerusalem, and whatever that was is gone. Like, it is just completely gone. We have nothing surviving in any texts. Even some of the second century writers, I think, refer to texts that we might associate with this early movement, but we don't have any of those either. So all that to say, yeah, I tend to think Jesus, whom I think was an apocalyptic Jewish prophet or apocalyptic Jewish charismatic, probably from the north, got himself in trouble and killed in Jerusalem. No, he would not have recognized what Christianity became even after Paul. Whatever ended up surviving in the Roman world that we understand was Christianity was very different from whatever was taking place in Jerusalem in the name of Jesus. I think prior to 70. So yeah.
I just want to ask a question about what you said about theology, because I've had even an evangelical minister.
I just have to interject really quick. We have 10 minutes. I still have comments, so please keep it short.
Oh no.
Okay. I'll just, it's one question.
Wait,
I've had...
that's not the slogan on the t-shirt. I still have comments is not the thing that you say.
Deal with it.
Okay, maybe I'll finish my question and you can say the thing. But I've had even a minister admit to me that John is theological rather than biographical. And when I look back with a critical eye over the synoptic gospels, they seem to me to be also theological rather than biographical. And so if we don't know any of the details of this dude's life as actually occurring, in what sense is the Jesus of the story a real person? Even if there were a lot of apocalyptic prophets that got in various
If I could
ways.
further complicate what she's saying, I always thought that John was a real, what is it, first century, early first century BC character, but this was a character that was appropriated to facilitate the burgeoning Jesus cult.
John the Baptist was. John the Baptist was a real prophet who was they worked in a connection and rewrote him in and tried to steal all his followers.
Same with Balaam, kind of, right?
Yeah, basically
Yeah, it was real
very
Christmas
similar
rework.
thing, although in a slightly more compacted time frame. And
Although I would say the reason why, in my view, that there was likely a Jesus guy behind all this stuff, like one guy, was because you have so many different traditions about it. You have the Synoptics, you have the Johannine traditions, and then you have the Pauline ones. So I think that having many traditions about something means a common stem.
I could contest that, but I could see how you could think that. So like it's a discussion to have another time when Tomer
It works
has finished his
within early
commentary.
Judaism.
It does. I can
Very,
see that.
very well. And that's what I keep coming back to, right? Like this is an eminently plausible model that scholars
Well,
have been working with now for
I'm already
like
in a
over 100
position where
years.
I'm already in a position where I'm not going to argue with Lawrence. I'm certainly not going to argue with Lawrence and Kip.
Sorry, Tomer.
There's discussion for interest, and then there's a you're wrong argument. These are two different things. I'm very interested in the first, not interested in engaging the second with either of these two.
Okay. I just look at characters like King Arthur and Robin Hood, and I see parallels with Jesus. You know, we added the Maid Marian character to the Robin Hood legends, for example. You know, if you could go back in time and find Robin Hood, good fucking luck if you could find him. But if you did, he would have never heard of Maid Marian. And I suspect that if we, that Jesus likewise would be upset that, just like with Robin Hood, if you brought him forward in time, you show him all the things that we remember him for, he would be upset because he did shit that nobody remembers. And the shit we remember him for never happened. Those would be two things he'd be complaining about. I think Jesus would be doing the same thing.
I think you would like his persona.
Yeah, and I don't look anything like that guy.
You mean he wasn't a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jew
Fox?
with long hair and
Oh, we're talking about Jesus. Sorry.
I kept my hair
Arthur.
short. It's curly. I always wear a hat. What's wrong with you?
I would say that's a pretty long discussion, though. So
You're right.
I think we should hop back into the comments.
Yeah.
Okay, back to comments. All right, so Sterling Nash says, percentage-wise, how much of the Old Testament is historically verified by other sources to be accurate? Whoa.
Ooh, that's
I don't
tough.
mean Genesis, but the parts that refer to people like these kings and tribal leaders.
Yeah, I can't give a percentage number. Maybe Kip has a better idea of percentage, but like there are some things that we can verify, right? Exile, Syrian invasion. We talked about Balaam in some way, right? With for a lot of.
But
the
didn't we
kings in
establish that
history-
Balaam is actually an argument against the historicity?
No, but I'm saying that the character was.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So we have some verification of that, right? We also have, evidence of kind of like a reworking for the mythology. We have evidence of what's it called? Was it Hezekiah's aqueduct, the tunnel, right? Salome. And
Yep, the tunnel.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
we also
There's a
have
steel.
archaeology. We also have steel and stuff that mention. I think Josiah, Ahaz. There's a few kings.
Manasseh is discussed
Manasseh,
in other texts. Yeah. So like,
is Ahaz the first one?
Is what?
Is Ahaz the earliest king to
Omri.
have
I think
archaeology?
so. No,
I think it's
I
Omri.
would. No.
Oh, I must maybe.
No,
Maybe
it's
not from
Amos.
if you're not necessarily archaeology, but we have Assyrian texts that know Omri,
Oh,
right?
Omri.
Which
Oh, yeah,
is
that might be
which
the
is
one I'm
like
thinking of.
early 9th century. So, and that's probably the earliest. In fact, I believe in some of the texts they just refer to the Northern Kingdom as literally Omri land.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and that's a difficult question too. I was going to say, just because of the nature of so much of the material, you've got lots of snippets of details that you can pull out of the 8th, 7th, 6th century prophets that are accurate, that are really, really benign and mundane stuff, right? Similar to as well the stuff that you see in the Deuteronomistic history, and there's reflections, I believe, too, even in like the Psalms of of uh stuff that's taking place in real places. Like, some of the songs were probably written uh in some sort of liturgical celebration of some sort, maybe even as early as the first temple.
I presume they
Um,
had songs.
All right, but let's get to Tomer's commentary.
yeah, Aaron, could you please extend the session a bit? Because I don't think I'll manage it in 3 minutes. I don't want to repeat Exodus 21
Sorry.
again.
You have it, of course.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
So, okay, verse 14, Weinfeld comments, the Deuteronomic tradition assigns to Manasseh a much larger area than the previous sources. The Argob district, which is given to Manasseh, includes here 60 fortified cities, of which there is no mention in the tradition of Numbers. According to Numbers 32:41, the villages, quote-unquote, conquered by Yair, son of Manasseh, are said to have been in Gilead, which is supported by Judges 10:4. In verse 14, these villages, quote-unquote, are said to be located in the Bashan, that is to say, north of Gilead. Furthermore, by situating the Chavot Yair in the district of Algob, the author identifies, as it were, villages, quote-unquote, with fortified cities in verse 4, which is artificial. Indeed, in the Solomonic districts in 1 Kings 4, there is a clear distinction between the Chavot Yair in Gilead and the Argob district with its 60 cities in the Bashan. It seems that by expanding the area to Manasseh to the north, the author of Deuteronomy extended the meaning of Chavot Yair by linking it to the territory of Bashan. This was followed up by the Deuteronomic historian in Joshua 13:30, quote, and all the Chavot Yair in Bashan, 60 cities, end quote. Verses 18 to 22, Weinfeld comments, this section consists of two passages, verses 18 to 20 and 21-22, each one marked by the opening formula ba'et hahi, at that time, which is characteristic of an independent unit. The first passage describes Moses' instructions to the 2.5 tribes in connection with their participation in the conquest of Canaan on the western side of the Jordan. This draws on the tradition of Numbers 32 about the settlement of the Reubenites and Gadites in Transjordan. The second passage describes the commissioning of Joshua as leader of the conquest. This has its antecedent in Numbers 27, verses 15 to 23, though there, because of the priestly nature of the tradition, the commissioning bears a sacred character. Joshua has to follow the decision of the Urim as presented by Eleazar the priest, while in the Deuteronomic tradition, the commissioning of Joshua involves encouragement for the battles with the Canaanites. Verse 25, that fine hill country. In Hebrew, it's Hahar Hatov Hazeh, which literally means this good mountain. Targum Suda Jonathan adds, on which the city of Jerusalem was built. Rashi also identified it as Jerusalem, and Lundbom writes that it designates the central highlands of Canaan, both north and south of Jerusalem. The Lebanon in the same verse, the Septuagint reads anti-Lebanon, which Weinfeld identified as Hermon and Syrian, mentioned in verses 8 and 9. Targum Onkelos reads the temple, and Targum Suda Jonathan, Mount Lebanon, where the Shekhinah will dwell. Rashi, Chizkuni, and Gersonides support this rendition, with Chizkuni noting that the temple was built from Lebanon trees. Verse 26, Lundbom comments, despite Yahweh's assurances of being a gracious God, even a towering figure such as Moses cannot expect that every request will be honored, as in Exodus 33, verses 12 to 20. In Deuteronomy, Yahweh is angry with Moses at Meribah because of the people's rebellion, whereas in the priestly source, Moses and Aaron are faulted for not sanctifying Yahweh before the people. Both explanations lack transparency. Verse 27, Pisgah, Lundbom writes that this is either a peak in the Abarim mountain range or else the range itself, the peak being Mount Nebo. The Septuagint reads Hyun, in Greek it's Laksevmeno, I believe, And McCarthy writes that it was perhaps inspired by the physical appearance of a mountain.
Which verse?
27.
27.
I'll continue while Lawrence looks it up. Look west and north and south and east. Tigay comments, east, Hebrew Mizracha, does not fit here, since the mountains of the area east of Mount Nebo are not part of the promised land. And according to 34 verses 1 to 3, Moses looked only north, west, and south. The list of directions is also found in Genesis 13:14 and 28:14. And it seems that mentioning all the directions was like a fixed formula, even though the order of the directions and their names could be changed.
Yeah, Lelaxiumeno.
Okay. And finally, in verse 29, Nelson comments, at this point, the narrative horizon of the Deuteronomistic I'll repeat again. At this point, the narrative horizon of the Deuteronomistic history is brought to a halt. It will resume in 31:1. Reference to Beth Peor forms a ring composition, bracketing Moses' retrospective speech by circling back to the local of lawgiving in 1:5. Beth Peor also sets the scene for Moses' second address that will soon follow in 446 and his eventual burial in 34:6. However, Peor is also a place of ominous tradition, the scene of an archetypal choice between fidelity and apostasy, as seen in 4 verses 3 to 4, Numbers 25 verses 1 to 13, and Hosea 9:10. Now, both the audience of Moses and the readers of Deuteronomy, primed for the challenges of the future, wait at the point of critical decision for Moses to speak the law. And that's it for my commentary.
Very good.
Thank you. You are muted, Aaron. On, you're muted.
Thank you, Tomer. I don't have anywhere to go from there. There's no more comments to read. We did go over by just a couple of minutes. I have stuff going on that I have to deal with, as is always the case. Every show we have, surprisingly. Can I get some comments from anybody else to close up the show tonight?
Just
Join the Discord.
next show. Next show is going to be Tuesday, right? Because Saturday is Snake Appreciation Day. That applies to us all.
And chapter 4, I have to warn, is my notes, at least on this chapter, are 8 pages. I mean,
we're going to get into the law, right?
Dr. Kip, did you not also warn us about that next chapter?
No, not that one. I was talking about 32, which is quite a ways.
Okay.
But this chapter is also important, I believe, for Deuteronomy.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Kip, for joining us again.
This was fun.
I'm glad you thought so. I
You're
have
free to stop by anytime.
Please.
Yeah, I'll come back.
Yay!
Yeah.
In
Maybe
Samuel,
you could remind Josh that I send him email invitations every week.
I did
too.
see him, but he's got like 6 kids, right? I mean, that's
yeah, they're piling up.
That's the excuse he always uses.
He's getting more and more every time I
The
talk.
excuse that I have is that they've all grown up now.
Yes, right. That's my excuse too. So, so I speaking of Dr. Josh though, since the last time I was here, and maybe Isaac and Tomer and I don't know, Lawrence, where you're at, and anybody from your audience, Josh and I have actually started like a Hebrew reading stream every second Thursday. We're doing it this week. We're reading through First Kings, and we're like geeking out on Hebrew grammar and syntax, which is
that would be very interesting to see, actually.
Yeah, man.
I mean,
it's on my channel.
I'm Israeli. I know Hebrew.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, of course you do.
Great.
I actually have. So I actually have 1 or 2 guys who are up early in the morning, who are in Israel, who are up early in the morning and join us on occasion. So because we can't do it until like Josh is off of work, so it's usually at like 5 o'clock in the evening. But
maybe when I'll be amnesia.
Sorry, man. It's like there you go. So yeah, but
I'll check that out. I've always been interested in TikTok, so I like that word as well.
I think it's fun. So
Sounds really
All right.
awesome.
Oh,
If anybody has any other closing comments, otherwise, we're about to jump to the end of the show, and we'll see you again next Tuesday.
I love you all. I'll be better by then.
Bye. Thank
little
everyone
bit.
for joining.
Bye, everybody.
thanks, guys.